nondual being, the real self, alone is. Being undifferentiated, it does not arise from anything else, nor does anything else arise from it. It is unborn, and for it there is no creation, no second at any time. It is realized by self-knowledge. Yet, as the Maharshi frequently points out in his spiritual instruction, there is no second, no other kind of self to realize it. In the inquiry, who am I? To know yourself as you are. The inquirer is the focus, and the inquirer is the answer to the question. There can be no other answer. In the attempt to meditate upon the truth of your own being, the meditator is first and foremost. What is the nature of the meditator? What is the nature of the inquirer? Self-knowledge is non-dual. As Sri Bhagavan points out, there is not one self to realize another self, for your existence is always singular. So then, what is meant by I in yourself? To realize the self, you cannot imagine a standpoint apart from it as your identity. If you do, such imagination is called an ego, and from the ego rises all kinds of illusion and its consequent bondage and suffering. Liberation, which is the natural state, is the egoless state. That is, freedom from such imagination. What is free from the ego is also free from the adjuncts of that ego, such as definitions in terms of the mind and body or the world. Inquire within yourself, who am I? The self is of the nature of being, consciousness, bliss, Satchidananda. There is no second existence or being to know it, no second consciousness to know it. Between the self and yourself, there is no chasm, no gap. If you imagine there is such duality, then inquire into what you regard as yourself. The self will be all right by itself. Inquire into the nature of yourself. If you do so, the false sense of individuality and all the adjuncts, the false definition piled on top of that ego idea, will be destroyed, will vanish, because they are not true. What remains is what has been existing all along. Because it has been existing all along, self-realization, though the only direct experience, is not an event in time. What comes, goes. What is gained is lost. In self-knowledge, what is realized, what you seek to know through inquiry, is something that neither comes nor goes, has neither creation nor destruction, is not gained and is not lost. The Maharshi reveals the truth about being, the truth of the self, which is the very substance, if we can call it such, of self-realization, by silence. Silence, as he has himself explained, is that in which no I arises. Where there is no I, nor is there anything else. Just being. It knows itself. Shankara has said that Brahman alone can know Brahman. That is, the self, real being, alone knows real being. There is no second. Where there is no second, there is no suffering, no fear, no death. Just the self-evident reality. To comprehend within yourself what has just been indicated, inquire within yourself, who am I? If you have a question or you wish to relate your own experience, at any point feel free to speak.
meditating on what identity means. You said that it's a question of identity, and everything refers to that. On the Santa Cruz leg of this pilgrimage, I've been ill, and I've been noticing a lot about what putting different chemicals into my body does, and both the apparent, just changes. Might have been some form of pneumonia, but it focused me very much on the body and on the impossibility of this being myself. But that is subjective to me, and I know about it. None of which, of course, I found very convincing at the time. There was an odd feature of this in which, for a day or so, I would get to a place where I couldn't breathe in and I couldn't breathe out. I was kind of stuck. I understand that the Pope got stuck similarly. So I hope I'm not tied to the Pope's fate, but anyway. The only thing that seemed to relieve this would be to force myself to say Jai Bhagavan, which would usually produce a release from this, not being able to breathe in or breathe out. I didn't seem particularly worried about it, that it was going to actually do me in at the moment, but it sort of felt that way. Anyway, the reaction of my body to these chemicals, whether it was for better or for worse, or just in the process of whatever changes were going on apparently, seemed real, and in meditating on what exactly is identity, I just had the feeling that identity was anything that I thought was so, or anything I thought was not so. All these things being objective to me cannot be myself. But as I said, and particularly in the process of not being able to breathe in or breathe out, I didn't find this too comforting. But in a way it was. I don't know what way that is. But the question of identity being all those things that I think about that are not myself, how to release this is sort of a question about how to release breathing. When I get stuck in not being able to breathe in or breathe out. And I don't know where to go from there. There doesn't seem to be, there's nothing that I can point to or think about. Anything that I think I can think about is just more stuff I'm thinking about. It's not myself. So in a sense I get back to, in order to release this impasse, which relates to breath and sort of prana or whatever. The only thing that I can think of is Jai Bhagavan. And as you've said, once you think of that, there's no more scope for the ego. And the scope for the ego is nothing but all these things that I've been thinking about. Think you're true or not true, or so or not so. So I'm sort of as usual. I'm a fish in the water complaining about being thirsty. The water complaining about being thirsty. And here we are drowning in wisdom. I can't breathe in or breathe out. So, Jai Bhagavan.
Within the scope of your description, you have more or less answered all your own questions.
Not to my own satisfaction, as my satisfaction is.
Then be sure of your identity being free of the body, your breath included, and everything you think of. The very fact that you notice that you have a great variety of thoughts, some of which are contradictory, yet your sense of existence remains unchanged and uninterrupted, should be for you more than ample proof that your existence is not thought. Remain free from thought. The very fact that you observe the prana, or animating life energy, which seems to be connected with your breath, means it is objective to you. You see its changes. What changeless thing sees all those changes? You are not at any kind of impasse. Who are you?
I'm not in any kind of
Impasse. You are not bound. Who are you?
You say remain free of thought. That's part of the identity matter that I've been looking at. And I can only hope or gather that being free from thought doesn't mean not having thoughts. It means not being identified with them. And so what I've been looking at is the process of identification and how it comes to be that I'm identified with these thoughts. That
Are you thought? Are you thought? Are you what you think?
obviously not, but I seem to be whole. It's almost as though this has focused my attention more on identification with the body and with all these misidentifications.
What do you mean it has focused your attention more?
More thinking about the body in one way or another, worrying about the body, hoping about the body.
Are you the body?
I can't possibly be the body, and I don't know why I don't accept that instead of...
The one who says, I don't accept it, is he a body?
No bodies around here.
Thinking about the body does not make your existence equivalent to a body. Wisdom has everything to do with the knowledge of your identity, who you are, in your real being. There is no similarity between your being and the body. You are not bound by a body. The same is true with thought. Clear?
I'd love to say yes.
But just runs against your grain to do so? Certainly you've become more keenly aware of how experiential the knowledge must be. What you think about won't save you when your breath is gone. What you think about will not save you when your breath is gone. What you know as your identity, fused with your existence, remains. There's where you find your peace. There's where you find your freedom. And that does not depend on thought, breath, bodily action, or any state of the body or mind. That is why, with all the questions you've ever asked about spiritual practice and self-realization, I have never put any emphasis on the activities of your body, or the activities of speech, or activities of mind. Because self-knowledge alone is liberation. Action does not lead to liberation, whether that action be subtle or gross. You can see, certainly, how tentative or flimsy the bodily condition is. It's not something to depend on. Likewise, your breath, or the prana, the animating energy. Certainly a train of thought in one direction or another is not steady. All the while, your existence is steady. You never cease to exist, and you never cease to know that you exist. Abide in that knowledge, free of misidentification. Do not give rise to the confusion that you are something else. And if you have given rise, inquire, and the truth about your nature will become self-evident. Then you see life and death with an equal eye.
My end of the Monterey pilgrimage was that we did our pilgrimage we separated out for that time. And during that time, there was so much worry and so much storytelling for me that I really understood that all of my suffering came through my thoughts, not what was actually happening. But it was an incredible array of suffering thought blows that I was giving myself second after second. But I still wasn't I know what I'm not, although I still get lost in that. I get lost in my thoughts. And if they will change their direction to get my thoughts are just complete suffering most of the time. But I still don't know, I still can't get, I know what I'm not, I still can't get who I am.
Who you are is non-objective, so how do you suppose you're going to obtain it or get it? If you really know that you are not your thoughts, then you'll not be lost in them. If one really knows the mind is non-existent, there is nothing in which to be lost.
So the knowing has to go very, very much deeper than right now. Yes.
Self-knowledge must penetrate right to the core. There's not much sense in saying, I know I am not my thoughts, but still they bother me all the time. Yeah. If we really know that what we think we are not, we are neither bound by those thoughts, nor will we continue to conjure up delusive thoughts. But you have seen that outer conditions do not create the mind suffering. The mind suffers over its own productions. This is what distinguishes a person being in a spiritual direction as compared to being worldly minded. Worldly mindedness or extroverted mind means we assume the external things are real, they determine us, they determine our happiness, and consequently our sorrow. A spiritually minded person will know that happiness is within, really know that, in which case there's no more a superimposition regarding outer environments upon one's own experience. The world neither gives you happiness, nor does it give you suffering. In truth, the world is not even real. The happiness, the reality, and your sense of identity all have their origin in you. Overlook your true nature. Suppose yourself to be something else. You will confound the real and the unreal. Imagine happiness to be elsewhere and suffer consequently. Turn your mind inward. Know the place of happiness. That place is within. Within is the self. So one-pointedly seek a knowledge of yourself. If you know yourself, you know reality. And you no longer dwell suffering in an unreal dream.
And one-pointedly is second by second. Well, I know seconds don't exist. Can you help me with one-pointedly more?
When you desire something intensely, you're one-pointed about it, aren't you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, see, you're very familiar with this. To use the example just cited before, if you're out of breath, you become one-pointed. The Maharshi gives the example of a drowning man trying to get to the surface. For some reason, he's not distracted on the way up. He doesn't delay thinking, yes, I'll get to that later. He does not think, yes, but I have all these other desires. He does not think within himself, I'm at an impasse. Should I or should I not get some breath and save my life? Nobody has that kind of idea. When we see the importance of self-realization, we become one-pointed. When we see the fleeting nature of life and the, not the possibility, but the fact of death, rather, we become one-pointed. When we see where happiness is, we become one-pointed. When we see the present opportunity to realize truth for all eternity, we become one-pointed. Try any or all of that. If you still have a problem with one-pointedness, ask again.
This, in ways, is a follow-up to what you had just said. Since returning from tour of anomaly in Arunachala, I find a real deep desire to intensify my practice. I find I meditate more frequently, and what I've been doing before the meditation is reflecting on desire for liberation. You've talked about that a lot. I really have not built that into my script, but it seems like a very worthwhile way to start and get the focus. Are there other things in practice that are worth doing again to just let this increase in focus bloom?
You've stated the most important. Adi Shankaracharya, has stated that of the fourfold practice for realization, you know that as the requisites. The last, the desire for liberation, is the most important. Even though discrimination and detachment and such are so much intrinsic to real practice, he says the desire for liberation is the most important. It is because if you have the desire for liberation, even if you be lacking in detachment, discrimination, tranquility, renunciation, etc., all those things would come to you in due course because of the intensity of the desire for liberation. While if that's lacking, even if you have a very sharp mind for discrimination, you renounce, etc., not much progress will be made. There'll be no motivation. Desire for liberation is important. When we, let's say, use your example, you decide to take some time for meditation. You have to know why you're meditating. In fact, the knowledge of why you're meditating, your approach, is as important as the content of the meditation itself. So if we keep just this much in mind, the focus is there. Then the practice blooms from there. The practice is one of inquiry. If you desire liberation, you'll destroy vasanas, tendencies, manifesting as attachment, misidentification, and such. If the desire is there, you'll have the motivation to examine your own mind and unravel it till there's nothing left to it. If you have the desire for liberation, naturally within yourself arises the spiritual practice, even on its manifest activities that are suitable for you. You've got the key, just keep applying it.
Thank you, Master. I wanted to ask something about that desire for liberation, how the aspirant is to view that. On the one hand, it seems I've heard that desire, even if it's not entirely aligned, is the last desire to worry about. It's not the problem. But looking at it for just a moment, I've also heard it said that it's not to be looked at as the hankering for an enjoyment by an individual. And at the same time, any postponement of grasping the truth of realization is not to be worried about so much as the suffering or postponed enjoyment of an individual. It's more trusting what the Guru has pointed out and then disposing of the illusion systematically. But not so much of a hankering for what would be the enjoyment by an individual. That would be contradictory.
Yes and no.
Okay.
Maharshi is the Guru, and he has pointed out that you must be ardent for liberation, and at the same time he said, who is to realize what? He's also said there is none bound, none liberated, no bondage, no liberation. So how do we put together what on the surface appears to be disparate statements, but which in truth have no contradiction among them at all? Let us say you know of liberation, and you hanker after it as an individual. There's no harm in that. You desire it as an individual. In order to fulfill that desire, you will have to dissolve the individuality. That individuality being dissolved, the desire is fulfilled. There's no casting off of the desire for liberation. If you would do so, you would just desire something else. Because it is in your very nature to be happy. As long as there's even a drop of suffering, you will desire that happiness. Liberation means freedom from the imagined bondage, revealing that bliss is innate, perfectly full.
What you seem to describe as the very best perspective on that. At the same time, I sort of see, I don't know if it's in human nature, but in this nature here, something a little more perverse sometimes comes in, which is that, well, maybe I won't get there, or maybe I won't get there this lifetime,
Get where?
to freedom.
Where is the freedom? What is the distance you're going to traverse?
That kind of clarity is not there when the first thoughts are being entertained.
Why not go by your better knowledge then?
Right, but what I'm trying to get to is that when it's seen too much as something that can be won or lost, that almost perversely is the occasion to sometimes put on the shabby clothes of the individual again and kind of lose focus.
If you think it can be won or lost, you had better win it.
And then what are they?
Oh, you asked Bhagavan? He's silent about this. It's a matter of winning or losing, a race against time, as it were.
Yeah.
To realize, you had better win. You better do everything in your power to win it. But in doing so, you will come to a point where you see it is imperative to dissolve the ego or false sense of individuality and all his concomitant ignorance. That being dissolved, and how else can it be dissolved or destroyed except by a thorough, constant inquiry that reveals its non-existent nature? That being destroyed, you see that what you desired to attain was not a new attainment, but had been existent all the time. So I'd say there is absolutely no danger of your desire for liberation in whatever form it might appear. I have seen people wander much due to lack of that desire. In other words, that the same desire is dispersed through various worldly means, and it is not focused on self-realization. So I've never met somebody with too much desire, or even misapplied desire, for liberation. Because even if it's misapplied along a line of sadhana that's not being as fruitful, still there'll be the element of knowledge that gives it some fruit, and then they will refine that practice until it's one of pure self-knowledge, in which case they'll realize it entirely. So I've never seen anyone hurt by that. But I have seen people wander around in mazes of their own creation in their minds due to lack of desire for liberation.
So you don't think that someone could, by fear of not succeeding, commits to wander in some kind of, despair, so to speak. I can't grasp this, I won't make it. You're saying even that can be used positively, so to speak.
Sure, because you still want to make it. You'll have to investigate the I who thinks he's going to fail.
Right.
Even the least attempt does not go in vain. Krishna stated that in the Bhagavad Gita, not a drop of this Dharma, I'm paraphrasing, is ever in vain.
So one need not worry about so-called or seemingly futile attempts, because there are no futile attempts if it's a true, honest attempt.
If there's sincerity, there will be in some way or another, at the core, some element of knowledge, and there'll be the fruit thereof. Whatever you do spiritually never comes to a loss. It's never in vain.
That's good clarification.
That's why the Maharshi is not critical of the great variety of spiritual methods, but simply points out the quintessence of pure knowledge and how that can be practiced directly, since we ourselves are the self we are trying to realize, duality not being true at any time, like the story of the 10 men.
So I'm getting a sense of it's just good to be busy with the task of self-liberation.
Yeah, unless you have something more worthwhile to do. So it serves little purpose to think, I'm going to make it, I'm not going to make it, woe is me, etc. You could use that valuable time that slips by in which you will not recover, unless you transcend time entirely. But you will not recover it. Why waste it? Spend the time in fruitful inquiry to know yourself. In terms of self-realization, there are no other factors in play except you. The obstacles, apparent only, are of your own creation. Ignorance and adherence to the ignorance, which forms delusion, is of your own doing. There's nothing anyone or any God has set up as an obstacle for you.
So there's nothing you're waiting for to settle down that's being imposed on you.
Nothing has been imposed on you. You may have superimposed various ideas upon yourself, various forms upon yourself, but no one and nothing else has done that. The bondage is all of one's own making, and the liberation is all of one's own knowing.
So you're not, I mean, sometimes there's a thought, oh, well, I haven't been practicing so intensely lately, but maybe I've been running through some karma or running out some karma or something.
If you have that observation, what should you do? Shouldn't you just practice more intensely? There's nothing wrong with observing that you're not practicing intensely as you could. You might make that observation each day. So each day you practice as fully as possible, and then you practice more intensely the next. Because at the end you realize, I could actually practice more intensely still. Since practice is a joy, a sweet joy exceeded only by the bliss of realization itself, there should be plenty of motivation. But don't waste your time bemoaning yourself. Nothing is in your way.
Typically what happens, you go back to work after taking 3 weeks off, and they say that that 3-week period that you were gone, now you have to make up in like a 1-week period. So when I came back, it seemed like there were a lot of, I don't know, just a lot of fires burning. And of course there was a lot of hot tempers. And it seems like it's still going on. So, you know, a lot of...
Are the hot tempers helping things?
Definitely not, although there's a certain belief inside the company that these are really helping. Because they continue to pursue it. Even though I keep saying, okay, how's it, you know, why be negative? Let's solve the problem. I mean, you know, anyway, that kind of quieted people down a little bit. But it definitely weighs on my mind, I have to admit. I mean, too much verbal, and a lot of it's directed at me for whatever reason. You know, because I wasn't there or whatever, I don't know. I mean, I'm not
because
sure
you weren't there, it was directed at you.
Anyway, it just comes back to just, I think, being identified with the body. You know, comes, you know, just seems like but also too, I'm looking for a job, obviously. I mean, whenever one arises, looks good, I'll take it right away. At a relative level. You know, I think past a certain point, you know, you can't, I don't know.
Are you inwardly indifferent to the opinions they may form of you, even in your absence? I mean, since they blame you when you're not there, there's a certain irony to it.
Well, it's actually not.
It really shows how much is in the
Actually,
mind.
That actually isn't 100% true, but they're acting like I don't get the point that there's, that this person, it was a screaming match about why this person is so screwed up. And it wasn't me in particular, it was somebody else. But I was trying to find solutions to, let's rectify this situation. Let's get a consultant in here to help, review this material or,
But they were too busy enjoying their anger.
Yeah, just
Find a
complaining about this
solution.
person. And that doesn't seem to be, worthwhile. In a certain sense, in a certain sense, you can either fire the person, then it's worthwhile to kind of discuss the pros and the cons of the person. In a certain sense, what they're bringing to the company or what. But this is just not talking about firing them. This is just a discussion, just for the fun of it, which, in my point of view, wasn't very fun. So, but it was sort of directed, a lot of vehement, was my misunderstanding of the situation. And I understand, that we've discussed this person many times, her inability to basically communicate, which causes everybody to become pissed off at her. And essentially, what happens is she gets in a tiff with these people, and then it comes back to the president, and the president says, this guy, this person must have some big issues, right? But it's just a matter of communication and trying to improve that. But somehow this anger gets directed at me for some strange reason. I have no clue why. So.
Does it affect you?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it doesn't affect me in a deeper sense, but it definitely affects my mind. I think I have to work on, obviously I have to work on, fixing this thing, it's sort of my job. But it causes me, similar to what Stan was saying, it's sort of like this, not quite to that degree, right? Life and death is, but a lot of anger being expressed your direction, it's, I don't know, the mind seems like doesn't like that. And just probably because of what, I don't know, maybe what they think. It's not that I'm constantly worried, but I'm worried about fixing this issue somewhat.
So you give your mental attention to fixing the issue. What does that have to do with you?
It doesn't have that much to do with me, except for the fact that I think when I'm over concerned, like for instance, if I sit in meditation and I think about it, then I know I'm misidentified. It seems because it seems like I should be able to drop this thing.
It could be. I wouldn't say it's proof that you're misidentified. Just that you're thinking about it. You probably have something better to do in meditation.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. But, yeah. I'm not always thinking about it. I mean, a lot of times that's for sure, but...
Even when you think about it, that which is keenly aware of the thoughts, is it bound? Are you a character in a dream that needs to work all this out? Or is your nature that infinite consciousness, entirely formless, that never does anything? In which all this appears, in which all this disappears, for which this appears, by which this appears. and which in truth is the only reality.
Yeah, it helps, that's for sure, because otherwise, to be at the, I don't know, I guess, whatever the mentality is there, it's a little convoluted, and there's no way that you can ever appease any sort of convoluted thinking.
They probably need a little bit more spiritual practice.
So in terms of being in that situation, though,
Are you in that situation?
yeah, that's okay. That's a good point. Okay, so the fact is I'm not in that situation.
Then stay with the facts. Stay with the truth. It's far better to stay in the truth, abiding in self-knowledge, which after all is natural, and is indeed the only thing real, than it is to imagine, to conjure up some situation which is only within you, as is all this universe. Imagine yourself then as a character within that situation, and then look for a temporary remedy at the level of the mind for the interaction between the character who's in the mind and the situation which is also in the mind. Follow?
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like the real key is coming down to, am I in this situation? What you said right at the very beginning, and that the mind, the fact is these imaginings aren't always, there's a just distinction between myself and imaginings. I have to know that better, deeper. Because it's, for some, I mean, it is kind of weird, because the mind will conjure up this stuff. It's definitely objective, but somehow I think I'm this kind of stuff.
If you think you're this kind of stuff, inquire as to who you are. If you say all this stuff, all this imagination has its source in the mind, discern the nature of the mind.
So when you talked about a second, so the second is thinking that the source of the mind is an individual.
Second is the false assumption of individuality, I, and then of course anything that follows thereafter.
Yeah. So
With the individual, God is viewed objectively, and so is the world, Jagat Jiva Par. The world, the individual, the supreme. But the truth is, there is no second I. For all experience, there is an I. If we inquire, for whom is this? Our way of looking becomes non-objective. If we make our outlook or our way of looking non-objective, we see what the self really is. It is indivisible, of a changeless, formless nature. It does not give birth to a second I. When the Upanishads say, one without a second, that means Brahman alone is, the self alone is. There's nothing else. Nothing else has ever come to be. Neither you, nor the world, nor a character, nor a work situation, nor any other experience.
So yeah, the pain, it seems like it comes in with that identification with the individual and both. There's a mind, a body, etc. that has to.
The individual I is the source of all other delusion, and therefore the source of all kinds of suffering and bondage.